Have you ever felt like you were just surviving, while life passes you by like a whirlwind of worries, noise, and expectations that aren't yours? Imagine that Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, or Epictetus are by your side today. What would they say about how you deal with the chaos of the modern world? They wouldn't limit themselves to excuses or distractions. They would look you in the eye and ask, are you really living or just reacting to what life throws at you? The Stoics knew that true strength does not lie in speaking louder or trying to control what does not depend on us. It lies in silencing the internal noise, focusing on what matters, and acting with intention. They faced tragedies, persecution, and irreparable losses, but they never let external noise rob them of their peace or direction. Don't think this is a distant or unattainable philosophy. It's a practice, it's action, it's urgency. It's about stopping wasting energy trying to please everyone, getting lost in useless thoughts, and living waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. Today, you will discover how to silence the voice of doubt, how to use silence as your greatest weapon, and how to focus your attention on building a life worth living. You will understand why seeking the approval of others is a prison, how to accept what cannot be changed, and how to turn every obstacle into fuel for growth. Every piece of advice here is a direct blow to the procrastination, anxiety, and paralysis that prevent you from moving forward. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you have all the time in the world. The Stoics repeated, memento mori, remember your mortality. You have no guarantees about tomorrow. The time you lose will never come back. And that's why every second of this video could represent the change you've been waiting for. If you want to stop surviving and start thriving, watch the video until the end. Don't miss any of the tips, as each one is designed to shake you up and push you out of your comfort zone. And if you want to continue receiving this dose of reality, practical philosophy, and transformation, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Here you won't find empty promises, but rather the direct path to a stronger, freer, and more stoic life. Are you ready to change things? Then let's do it, because the world won't wait, and neither should you. Thoughts are not facts. Master your mind. Thinking that our thoughts are absolute truths is a silent trap that imprisons even the most experienced minds. Since ancient Greece, Stoicism has warned of the danger of confusing what goes through our minds with the reality of facts. The Stoics taught that thoughts are nothing more than impressions, images, and ideas that arise spontaneously in the mind, often without us having any control over them. They compared these thoughts to clouds crossing the sky. They can be dense, dark, fast, or almost imperceptible, but they are never the sky itself. The sky is us, our essence, and the clouds are just temporary visitors. Stoic philosophy shows that the human mind is a factory of interpretations, not facts. When we feel fear, anger, or insecurity, it is usually not because of what actually happened, but because of the story we tell ourselves about that event. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and one of the greatest representatives of Stoicism, wrote in his meditations that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but the opinion we form about them. Suffering arises from this fusion between thought and reality, as if each negative idea were a definitive sentence about who you are or your future. However, the truth is that you can learn to separate what is just mental noise from what really matters. The Stoic secret lies in cultivating mindfulness, what they called prososche. It means being always vigilant, observing what arises in your mind without automatically identifying with each thought. When a negative thought appears, instead of letting ourselves be carried away by it as if it were a runaway train, the Stoic observes, questions, and chooses whether it is worth paying attention to or not. This detachment is not coldness, but freedom. It is the ability to look at a thought as if reading a news story. You can agree, disagree, investigate further, or ignore it. You're not obliged to believe everything that crosses your mind. The Stoics also taught that, although we cannot control the emergence of thoughts, we can control how we react to them. This is the famous control dichotomy. It is not in your power to prevent negative thoughts from arising, but it is entirely within your power to decide what to do with them. You can choose to feed a negative thought, letting it grow and dominate your mood, or you can simply let it pass, like someone watching a boat float down the river without needing to board it. The practice of distinguishing between what is within your control and what is not is one of the most powerful in Stoicism. With time and practice, this Stoic attitude transforms your relationship with yourself. Anxiety loses its power because you no longer react automatically to every catastrophic thought. Your self-esteem grows because you realize that you are not defined by fleeting ideas of failure or inadequacy. Self-control becomes stronger because every time you choose not to identify with a negative thought, you are proving to yourself that you are greater than any mental impression. It is a process of re-education, of training your mind to be your ally and not your enemy. Finally, Stoicism teaches that true freedom is not having a mind empty of negative thoughts, but rather having the power to choose which thoughts to believe and which thoughts to act on. The Stoic sage does not try to eliminate all uncomfortable emotions or thoughts, but learns to live with them without letting them dominate. They understand that the mind is fertile, full of possibilities, but only truly flourishes when discernment is cultivated. In Stoicism, mastering the mind means accepting that thoughts are not facts, and that in the end, we are always greater than any idea that crosses our minds. Silence is their greatest weapon. Since ancient times, the great masters of Stoicism have known that true power does not lie in who speaks the loudest, but in who knows when to remain silent. In a world that values quick answers and instant opinions, the art of silence is almost a forgotten superpower. Stoics such as Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus did not see silence as weakness or passivity, but as a demonstration of self-control and wisdom. They understood that by choosing silence, one is not avoiding confrontation, but rather creating space to see beyond the obvious, to hear what really matters, and to act with intention. For the Stoics, silence was a conscious choice. It is not about remaining silent, but about using silence as a strategic tool to master one's emotions and avoid impulsive decisions. When you remain silent in the face of provocation, for example, you are not submitting, but protecting yourself from saying something that could come back to haunt you later. Silence gives you time to think, analyze the situation, and respond sensibly rather than reacting on impulse. It is in this interval between stimulus and response that true Stoic power lies. Modern society, noisy and fast-paced, pressures us to fill every moment with words, opinions, and justifications. In practice, however, those who talk too much end up getting lost in their own speech, while those who master silence stand out. The Stoic understands that not every question deserves an answer, not every criticism deserves a defense, and not every situation requires an explanation. Often silence is the most powerful response one can give. It disarms the other person, preserves our energy, and puts us in control of the situation. Those who rush to speak usually reveal weakness. Those who know how to wait demonstrate strength. Silence is also an invitation to reflection. By choosing silence, we create an internal space to listen to ourselves, to understand our emotions, and to understand what is really going on inside us. It is in this space of stillness that we find clarity to make better decisions and act with more purpose. The Stoics taught that self-control begins with control of the tongue. Speaking less is not being silent, but rather filtering what is really worth saying. Words thrown to the wind cannot be taken back, but silence preserves our reputation and our peace. In addition, silence strengthens relationships. Instead of competing to see who can talk the most, try listening carefully without rushing to respond. Silence allows you to pick up on nuances, perceive hidden intentions, and create a deeper connection with others. Often people just want to be heard, not needing advice or opinions. In this case, silence is an act of respect and empathy. It shows that you are present, attentive, and willing to understand, not just argue. Finally, silence is an exercise in humility. It teaches us that we don't have to prove anything to anyone, that our strength does not depend on external recognition, but on our own internal balance. The Stoics knew that the noise of the world is fleeting, but the peace achieved through silence is lasting. When we learn to feel comfortable with silence, we discover that we do not need the approval of others to feel secure. The truly wise are those who speak when necessary, but know when to remain silent when silence says it all. To master silence is to master oneself, and those who master themselves conquer everything. The focus is on you, not on the world. Stoicism invites us to a radical change of perspective. Instead of wasting energy, trying to control what is beyond our reach, we should look inward and invest in what really depends on us. This philosophy, which has spanned centuries, teaches that true progress does not come from external circumstances, but from the courage to take responsibility for one's own life. Many spend years waiting for the world to change, for people to be more understanding, for opportunities to arise, or for luck to finally come knocking. However, Stoics show that this waiting is a trap, as life will never align perfectly with our desires. The secret lies in understanding that your power begins and ends in your own mind, in the choices you make, and in the attitudes you adopt every day. The basis of this philosophy lies in the famous dichotomy of control, distinguishing between what is within your control and what is not. We cannot control the behavior of others, government decisions, the weather, or unexpected tragedies. However, you can control how you react to each situation, what you do with what you have, and how you choose to interpret the events around you. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest examples of Stoic leadership, faced wars, betrayals, and profound losses, but never allowed external chaos to affect his inner peace. He knew that by focusing on his own development, he would be able to weather any storm without losing his balance. By applying this principle in our daily lives, we begin to realize how much energy is wasted on complaints, comparisons, and unrealistic expectations. It's easy to fall into the trap of blaming the world for our difficulties, but that only keeps us stuck in the role of victim. Stoicism teaches that true freedom comes when we take control of our narrative. No matter how many obstacles there are, if you are willing to learn, adapt, and evolve, nothing can stop you from moving forward. Progress does not depend on perfect conditions, but on your ability to act with what is currently available. Self-knowledge is one of the most powerful tools on this journey. Stoics recommend the daily practice of self-analysis, reflecting on your actions, identifying patterns of behavior that limit you, and seeking constant improvement. Although it can be uncomfortable, honesty with yourself is the only way to truly grow. Instead of comparing yourself to others, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a personal victory and proof that the right focus has the power to transform any reality. Another essential lesson is to cultivate resilience. Life is unpredictable and often unfair. However, by strengthening your mind and character, you become capable of facing adversity without being deeply shaken. Stoicism does not promise an existence without pain, but it guarantees that pain does not have to dominate you. When we stop expecting the world to be fair and start acting with justice, courage, and discipline, we discover an inner strength that no one can take away. Finally, focusing on yourself is not selfishness, but an act of responsibility. The more you invest in your own development, the more prepared you will be to contribute to the world around you. The Stoic does not isolate themselves, but understands that they can only truly help others when they are whole. By building a solid foundation of self-confidence, discipline, and clarity, you become an example of stability amid chaos, a source of inspiration for those who are still lost in external distractions. The world may be uncertain, but those who focus on themselves build their own path regardless of circumstances. Redirect your attention. Feed what makes you grow. The human mind is like a garden. What you cultivate determines what flourishes. The Stoics understood that our attention is a precious resource, and that directing it toward what strengthens us is an art that requires discipline. While the modern world bombards us with distractions, Stoic philosophy invites us to a quiet revolution, replacing unproductive mental habits with a deliberate focus on what really matters. It's not about repressing thoughts, but consciously choosing where to invest our mental energy. Stoic practice begins with a simple principle. We can only control our reactions, not external events. When we realize that spending time ruminating on the past or fearing the future is useless, we naturally redirect our attention to the present. Epictetus compared the mind to a wild horse. Without training, it follows any impulse. With mastery, it obeys the rider. Whenever you consciously interrupt a negative thought to focus on practical solutions, you strengthen your ability to govern that mental energy. The Stoics practiced prosoph, which consists of being aware of your own thoughts. Imagine observing your mind as a neutral spectator. When a negative thought arises, don't reject it forcefully, but simply label it, "This is just a worry," and let it pass. like leaves carried away by a river. This emotional distance breaks the cycle of self-sabotage. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his diary not to punish himself for mistakes, but to identify mental patterns and replace them with reflections that brought him closer to his virtues. A powerful exercise is negative visualization, not as an act of pessimism, but as an antidote to distraction. By imagining challenging scenarios, such as losses, failures, or criticism, you train your mind to stay focused on what is essential even under pressure. This creates resilience. Instead of wasting energy on what-ifs, you focus on what you can do now. Your attention is no longer hijacked by hypothetical fears and is instead focused on concrete actions. The key is repetition. Like a muscle, the mind strengthens with consistent use. If you set a clear intention at the beginning of the day, "Today I will focus on solutions, not problems," you are creating a mental filter. Whenever your attention wanders, bring it back to that purpose, like someone adjusting the rudder of a boat against the waves. Over time, this change becomes automatic. Negative thoughts lose strength due to lack of attention, while constructive thoughts become stronger. The Stoics also taught that growth requires replacement, not just elimination. Instead of trying to stop thinking about X, occupy your mind with Y, goals, learning, gratitude. If you find yourself criticizing someone, channel your energy into identifying a positive quality in that person. If you feel anxious about work, focus on a micro-task that advances your projects. The mind cannot stand a vacuum. Fill it with what builds you up. Finally, remember, mastering your attention is an act of self-love. Whenever you focus on what makes you grow, you are telling yourself that you deserve more than mental turmoil. As Seneca advised, protect your time like a treasure. Don't waste it on anything that doesn't contribute to your excellence. True Stoic freedom isn't about controlling the world, but about directing your mind to build the life you deserve, thought by thought. Accept and move on. Stop fighting the inevitable. Acceptance is not surrender, but rather recognizing the ground you are standing on so you can chart the wisest course. The Stoics taught that life is like a river. You cannot stop the current, but you can learn to navigate it. While many wear themselves out trying to change what has already happened or control the uncontrollable, Stoic wisdom proposes an inner revolution, transforming acceptance into power to act. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, faced plagues, wars, and betrayals without ever losing his serenity, because he understood that resisting the inevitable only increases suffering. The essence of Stoicism lies in the dichotomy of control, radically separating what depends on us from what does not. We do not choose to lose a job, be betrayed, or face illness, but we do decide how to react to these events. Epictetus, who was born a slave and overcame countless adversities, compared life to a play. We do not control the plot, but we can choose how to perform. Accepting the inevitable is not passivity, but rather saving energy to invest in the only domain over which we have sovereignty, our choices. For Stoics, pain never comes from the fact itself, but from the narrative we create about it. When someone hurts us, it is not the other person's action that hurts us, but our interpretation that we have been wronged. Seneca warned that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. Instead of harboring resentment or questioning, "Why did this happen to me?" the Stoic asks, "How can I use this to make myself stronger?" Active acceptance requires us to face reality without illusions, using each obstacle as raw material to sculpt our resilience. The practice of amor fati, loving fate, is fundamental to this process. It is not about romanticizing pain, but about embracing life with all its rough edges. Nietzsche, influenced by Stoicism, stated, "My formula for human greatness is amor fati, not wanting anything to be different, neither in the past, nor in the future, nor for all eternity." In practice, this means finding purpose even in setbacks. A job loss can be the impetus to start a business. Betrayal can teach lessons in self-confidence, and loss can teach the value of the present. The Stoics also practiced negative visualization, mentally anticipating the worst-case scenarios, not to fear them, but to prepare for them. By imagining that you may lose something valuable, such as your health, a relationship, or resources, you develop gratitude for what you have and your mind becomes stronger to deal with the eventuality. This technique is not pessimism, but an exercise in inner freedom. When we stop fighting against the possibility of failure, we begin to see it as part of the journey, not as an end. True Stoic strength lies in moving forward without demanding guarantees. Life does not promise fair rewards, but every challenge carries within it the seed of a virtue to be cultivated: patience, courage, and creativity. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the path." Accepting the inevitable is like learning to walk in the rain without complaining. You can't stop the storm, but you discover how to move forward even when you're wet. And in that progress, you find unbreakable serenity, because you know that nothing external can take away what you have already achieved within yourself: self-control, clarity, and the courage to continue. Stop seeking approval. Free yourself from the prison of other people's opinions. The relentless pursuit of approval is a chain that imprisons even the strongest. More than 2 millennia ago, the Stoics warned that living according to the opinions of others is like handing over the reins of your life to strangers. Epictetus, born a slave and one of the greatest masters of Stoicism, compared this need for validation to a disease of the soul. Do you want to be loved by those you do not love? Then you are sick. True freedom begins when we stop begging for recognition and start living in accordance with our most authentic nature. The Stoics practiced a radical separation between what is within our control and what is not. Your opinions, judgments, and reactions are yours alone. Trying to change them is like shouting against the wind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily in his meditations, "Let no one else hear your complaints about life, not even yourself." The approval of others falls into the category of the uncontrollable, just like the weather, traffic, or the past. Spending energy on this is wasting the only resource that is truly ours: the ability to choose how to act in the present moment. The trap of external validation stems from a confusion between being and appearing. The Stoics argued that our essence lies in the virtues we cultivate: wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control, and not in the image we project. Seneca warned, "How many live for appearances, forgetting that behind the social mask there is a real being to be developed." When we prioritize looking good over being good, we are betraying our principles and abdicating our integrity. Approval gained through a false facade is as empty as a theater without an audience. The Stoic practice of prososche, which consists of paying attention to one's own thoughts, is an antidote to this slavery. By observing how the mind creates stories about what others will think, one gains critical distance. Epictetus proposed a brutal exercise in honesty. Before you act, ask yourself, is this in line with my values, or am I just putting on a show for others? This self-observation reveals how many of your choices are genuine and how many are social masks. Over time, you realize that the only audience that matters is your conscience. The Stoics did not deny the importance of human relationships, but they reversed the logic. Instead of seeking approval, they focused on deserving approval through moral excellence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Become so good that your bad reputation is questionable." This attitude transforms the dynamic. You stop adapting to the behavior of others and start acting with such conviction that you naturally attract those who resonate with your authenticity. Those who don't align with you simply walk away, sparing you from relationships based on false agreements. The final liberation comes from cultivating Stoic self-discipline. By practicing indifference to praise and criticism on a daily basis, you develop progressive immunity. Imagine yourself as a solid tree. The winds may shake your branches, other people's opinions, but they will never uproot you, your inner values. Seneca summed it up: the greatest proof of maturity is not to be upset by praise or destroyed by criticism. This inner strength does not come from isolation, but from the courage to be visibly authentic, even when the world whispers that you should be different. In Stoicism, the approval that really matters is that which comes from your inner court. Every night, when examining your conscience, a practice known as epimelia hiutu self-care, ask yourself, did I live today according to my best self? If the answer is yes, no external judgment will have the power to shake your peace. This is true freedom, not needing the approval of others to exist because you have become your own judge, jury, and lawyer, and your final verdict is acquittal. Silence heals. Find the answer within yourself. In a world that celebrates noise and speed, silence has become an act of resistance. More than 2 millennia ago, the Stoics already understood that stillness is not escape, but a courageous dive into the depths of one's own existence. While modernity invites us to fill every void with distractions, Stoic philosophy reminds us that it is in silence that we find the answers that external noise could never offer. It is not about avoiding life, but about facing it with clearer eyes and a more prepared heart. For the Stoics, silence was an exercise in sovereignty over one's own mind. In his diaries, Marcus Aurelius described stillness as a sacred space where he could discern between what was essential and what was just passing noise. When we stop running, talking, and consuming information, we create a vacuum where inner truth can emerge. It's like clearing the choppy surface of a lake to see what's at the bottom, your most authentic motivations, fears, and desires. Silence, in this sense, is not absence, but total presence in oneself. Healing begins when we allow emotions and thoughts to arise without judgment. The Stoics practiced prososche, or mindfulness of internal movements, observing every impulse, every anguish, as a neutral spectator. Instead of repressing pain or disguising it with toxic positivity, Stoic silence teaches us to embrace it, understanding that even sadness can teach lessons. Epictetus compared the mind to a garden. If you don't pull weeds out by the roots, they will grow back. Silence is the hoe that allows us to analyze deeply and extract what needs to be transformed. One of the biggest myths about silence is that it isolates us. In fact, it brings us closer. When we stop projecting our insecurities onto the outside world, we realize that many of the answers we sought in relationships, achievements, or recognition were already within us. Seneca warned that those who cannot keep silent will never know how to listen, neither to others nor to themselves. Silence restores the connection with our essence, that part of us that does not depend on applause, criticism, or circumstances to exist. It is in this space that we discover that we were already complete, even before any external achievement. The Stoic practice of silence is also an antidote to anxiety about the future. When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, what others think, the results of our actions, the unexpected events of life, we find peace in the simple act of existing. Imagine yourself as a tree in the middle of a storm. While the branches sway, your thoughts, the trunk, your essence, remains firm. Silence is the root that anchors you, reminding you that regardless of the external chaos, you can always return to your center. Ultimately, silence reveals that the answers are not found in magic formulas or the advice of others, but in the courage to face our own history. The Stoics did not promise a life without pain, but they guaranteed that pain could be transformed into wisdom. When you sit in stillness, without distractions, without masks, you face your demons and discover that they were not as scary as they seemed. In this process, silence is not an end, but a beginning. The starting point for rebuilding your life, not based on what the world expects, but on what your soul already knows to be true. Silence the stress. Peace is in stillness. We live in a world that glorifies speed and productivity, where pauses are seen as a waste of time. However, the Stoics knew that the real antidote to stress is not in doing more, but in learning to stop. While society pressures us to react instantly to every stimulus, Stoic philosophy teaches us that stillness is the fertile ground where clarity and self-control are born. It is not about running away from responsibilities, but about creating moments of silence to regain control over your own mind. For Stoics, stress arises when we allow external factors to hijack our attention. Marcus Aurelius compared the restless mind to a turbulent river. The more we try to control the current, the more we drown. The key is to recognize what is beyond our control: traffic, other people's opinions, the unexpected, and focus on the only sovereign territory, our reaction. When we stop fighting what we cannot control, the tension loses its power. In this context, silence is not passivity, but a strategy to regain focus on what is essential. The Stoic practice of prososche, which consists of paying full attention to one's own thoughts, reveals that stress is often fueled by internal narratives. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? These are like winds that stir the mind. Epictetus taught that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. By silencing the mental noise, we interrupt the cycle of anxiety and realize that most of the problems we imagine never materialize. External silence is, in this case, the bridge to calming the internal chaos. The Stoics also valued the art of the strategic pause. Seneca recommended brief intervals of reflection during the day to come back to yourself. These moments of stillness don't need to be long. 5 minutes of conscious breathing, a moment of observing nature, or even closing your eyes in the midst of confusion. These pauses break the fast pace of the body and mind, reducing cortisol levels and restoring emotional balance. It's like pressing an internal reset button. Another crucial teaching is the radical acceptance of the present. Stress often arises from resistance to the now. We want things to be different, faster, easier. The Stoics practiced amor fati, love of fate, viewing each moment as an opportunity to exercise virtues such as patience and resilience. When we stop fighting the present and observe it in silence, we realize that peace does not depend on circumstances, but on how we face them. Finally, Stoic silence is training for inner freedom. While the world demands immediate responses, you learn to respond only when necessary, with thoughtful words and measured actions. This attitude not only reduces stress, but also strengthens your personal authority. Those who master silence master themselves and find peace even in the midst of a storm. Stillness is therefore not an escape. It is the space where you regain the right to live and not just react. Speak less, speak better. The impact is in the intention. The Stoics taught that words are sacred tools that must be used with the precision of a surgeon and the wisdom of a philosopher. While the modern world values those who speak quickly and often, Stoicism reveals that true eloquence lies in strategic silence and intentional speech. For the great masters such as Seneca and Epictetus, each word was a seed capable of generating understanding or conflict. Speaking without purpose is not only useless, but also a waste of energy that could be applied to transformative actions. Stoic practice begins with a simple principle: master the dichotomy of control. We cannot control how others will receive our words, but we can carefully choose what we say. Epictetus compared the tongue to a ship on the high seas. Without a rudder, it follows any wind. With direction, it reaches safe harbors. Before speaking, ask yourself, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it useful? If the answer to any of these questions is no, silence is the wisest choice. Speaking less is not omission, but rather selection of what is essential and what is superfluous. The Stoics practiced the art of active listening, understanding that listening is the basis of effective communication. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his diaries about the importance of listening as if you were learning, even when you already know. When you listen carefully, you gain time to analyze contexts, perceive nuances, and respond with depth. The pause between listening and speaking is not empty. It is in this interval that reason replaces impulse. Those who master this interval avoid unnecessary conflicts and build bridges instead of walls. Stoic speech is also marked by emotional restraint. Seneca warned that hasty words, especially in moments of anger or euphoria, are like poisoned arrows. Once released, the damage is irreversible. The wise do not react, they ponder. Imagine each word as a limited resource. To waste them on trivialities or unimportant discussions is to exhaust their power when it is most needed. Save your voice for moments when it can truly educate, inspire, or heal. Another pillar is consistency between speech and action. Stoics despised hypocrisy and valued integrity. Your words should accurately reflect your values, not serve to manipulate or please. Epictetus said, "If your actions don't match your words are just noise." This requires self-awareness. Before criticizing someone, examine whether you are making the same mistake. Before making a promise, assess whether you can keep it. Empty words erode credibility, while honest silence builds respect. Finally, the Stoics saw silence as training in humility and self-sufficiency. Speaking less reduces the need for external validation, as there is no need to prove anything, just to be. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "Let no one hear you complain, not even yourself." When we stop seeking approval through speech, we discover that our existence is already complete. In this sense, silence is not absence, but fullness. It is the certainty that, even in silence, your character and actions continue to speak for themselves. The true mastery of Stoic communication lies in understanding that less is always more. Every word emitted out of wisdom strengthens your presence. Every thoughtful sentence increases your influence. While the world shouts, the Stoic whispers and is heard. Because in the end, it is not the quantity of words that defines their impact, but the pure intention behind each one. Progress, not perfection. Move forward every day. The obsession with perfection is a trap that imprisons even the most dedicated. For millennia, Stoics have warned that striving for absolute flawlessness is like chasing the horizon. The further you go, the further it recedes. While the modern world glorifies flawless results, Stoicism proposes a quiet revolution. Replace the pursuit of perfection with the daily cultivation of moral excellence. This is not about mediocrity, but about recognizing that true greatness comes from consistency, not from the absence of flaws. Stoic philosophy teaches us to distinguish between control and desire. We cannot guarantee that all actions will be perfect, but we can ensure that every effort will be authentic. In his meditations, Marcus Aurelius emphasized that virtue is not in always being right, but in persisting even when you are wrong. Imagine a sculptor. He does not carve a masterpiece in one go, but removes chips daily, patiently adjusting the shape. Similarly, human progress is a series of small adjustments, not a sudden leap to perfection. Epictetus compared life to athletic training. The athlete does not win because he is unbeatable, but because he gets up after each fall. In the Stoic view, error is not failure, but feedback. When we stumble, we are not regressing, but identifying where we need to strengthen our character. The practice of prososche, mindful attention to one's own actions, allows us to analyze failures without destructive self-criticism. Instead of punishing yourself for not achieving an ideal, ask yourself, what does this experience teach me about my resilience, humility, or ability to adapt? The Stoics practiced amor fati, or love of fate, including the imperfections along the way. Seneca wrote that life is like a novel. It is more important to live it well than to live it long. Every day is a blank page where you can write better versions of yourself, even if some lines have smudges. Perfection requires us to hide those smudges. Progress requires us to recognize them as part of the narrative. A vase broken and repaired with gold, kintsugi, does not deny its cracks, but rather transforms them into beauty. Stoic discipline also invites us to redefine the concept of victory. While society celebrates external milestones such as promotions, praise, or material achievements, Stoicism measures success by internal consistency. Don't ask yourself, was I perfect today? But was I braver than yesterday, fairer, more resilient? Progress means replacing the anguish of I'm not good enough with the practical question, how can I be 1% better today? A small step, repeated over years, can change the world. Finally, Stoics remind us that the pursuit of perfection is a form of arrogance. That is, believing that we can transcend human nature. True humility lies in accepting that we are works in progress. Marcus Aurelius claimed that even his own diaries, written for himself, were full of imperfections, and so they should be. Life is not a sculpture to be polished until it shines, but a river that grows stronger as it flows, carrying both stones and pearls in its course. Progress is not a destination, but the courage to navigate these waters every day, aware that the only real failure is to stop rowing. We have reached the end of this Stoic journey, but the truth is that the real journey begins now within you. If you have followed each reflection, you will have realized that there is no magic or shortcuts. The power to transform your life lies in the small daily choices, in the courage to silence the noise of the world and listen to what really matters, in the brutal honesty of looking at yourself and taking responsibility for your destiny. The Stoics never promised a life without pain, challenges, or doubts. They taught that it is possible to weather any storm with clarity, strength, and serenity, as long as you stop seeking perfection and start valuing constant progress. Now it's your turn to act. It's no use just thinking, planning, or waiting for the perfect moment. What makes the difference is the step you take today, the decision to talk less and act more, to focus on what you can control and let go of what only distracts you. Remember, every minute you invest in yourself, every habit you improve, every thought you choose to nurture, builds the foundation for a freer, stronger, and more authentic life. Don't wait for approval from others. Don't hold on to the past. Don't paralyze yourself with fear of making mistakes. Stoicism is about action, presence, and turning every obstacle into an opportunity for growth. If you've made it this far, you've already proven that you have a thirst for change and a desire to evolve. So don't let that energy fade. Write in the comments what lesson has impacted you the most. Share this message with someone who needs a push to get out of their comfort zone. And of course, subscribe to the channel to continue receiving content that will challenge you to be better every day. Like, follow, and join this community of people who have chosen to be the protagonists of their own stories. The world can be noisy, chaotic, and unpredictable, but those who master silence, focus, and action build a life worth living. See you next time, and remember, your progress starts now.